Glory be to thee, O God, for thy manifestation of love to mankind. O thou who art our life and light, guide thy servants in thy way, and make us rich in thee, and free from all save thee. O God, teach us thy oneness, and give us a realization of thy unity, that we may see no one save thee. Thou art the merciful and the giver of bounty. O God, create in the hearts of thy beloved the fire of thy love, that it may consume the thought of everything else save thee. Reveal to us, O God, thine exalted eternity, that thou hast ever been, and wilt ever be, and that there is no God save thee. Verily, in thee will we find comfort and strength.
Shall we start?
Yes.
Okay. You know, the reference in that prayer to fire is an interesting one. Jesus said, except you be born by fire and by water. Okay. And the fire here burns, and it burns away veils. Okay. Fire burns away those things which prevent us from seeing the truth, from seeing reality. I just thought I'd comment on that. The topic today is the rise and fall of civilizations, and we're going to take a little bit of a different approach. We're going to start with the Garden of Eden and the tree in that garden, because there's a lot of symbolism in that tree. Every manifestation of God brings a new revelation, a new tree. Okay. Now, in the Garden of Eden, the tree bore fruit, and it's symbolic, of course, the apple. Okay. Now, let's look at the life of a tree just for a moment, because we can see the rise and fall of civilizations in this. There have been roughly 32 to 33 known civilizations. Every one of them collapsed from within, okay, except one which we won't deal with, and that invited itself to be invaded. So for everything, there is a season, as the good book says, and a time under the heaven. Heaven is religion. Earth, Jesus said, heaven and earth shall pass away, but my word shall not pass away. The word is the manifestation of God. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was made flesh and dwelt amongst us. So the Word is the manifestation or messenger of God. Okay, a tree goes through seasons. There's a springtime, a summer, an autumn, and a winter. The springtime, symbolically, is the arrival of a new revelation. Bahá'u'lláh says, the divine springtime hath come. Okay? Now, the springtime is that time in nature when things come to life, and they start to grow again. Okay? And first they grow leaves, and they add to the branches, and then they grow flowers, and then from the flowers come the fruit. Now, the flowers represent the principles, the teachings of a new faith, which we see in individuals. They're like the seeds that take root in fertile soil. We are the soil, okay? We are the ones in whom those seeds take hold, if we have a good heart. Because there are a number of references where the word stones is used, okay? Seeds do not grow on stones. They need fertile soil. So these seeds give us the flowers, which means that we see in individuals, the 12 apostles, the first Christians, the principles acted out at an individual level. The fruit comes later, when the society has been influenced by these principles to the point where it's permeated throughout the whole culture, and we have a new heaven and a new earth, as the good book says. So throughout the ages, we've had this rise and fall of civilization. Now we're going to use some more symbolism from the Baha'i writings, but it's also in all traditional beliefs. The sun, the moon, and the stars. For example, Jesus, they asked him, when shall these things be? And he said, the sun shall be darkened, the moon shall not give its light, and the stars shall fall from heaven. The sun is the religion itself. It loses its force, its energy. Okay? The moon are the teachings. People no longer follow the teachings. Do we have to talk about that at great length? Look at the world today. And the stars are the religious leaders. They lose their way. They fall, in other words, from positions of authority, true authority. And while we're at it, we're going to define authority here. It is not simply the right to make a pronouncement. Authority is both the right to make a pronouncement and the expectation that it will be obeyed. That has gone, okay? You go around the world and you look at people of whatever faith, and this is not a criticism. This is the way Jesus said it would be, okay? People are no longer following the teachings. They're inventing new standards which are contrary to the religious traditions of every past faith. So what we see is the weakening of the fabric of society. Every society has as its most basic impulse an ethical or a moral position, a vision of something that could be better. And that applies both to the physical, the arts and the sciences, and to the spiritual, the rules by which individuals are governed, okay? How they treat their fellow man. These are the fruits of every revealed religion, but they come to an autumn when they lose their force, as we were saying earlier. And the winter, as Shakespeare would say, the winter of our discontent is the winter of the dead time, okay? Where all of these things which have supported us for centuries, okay, are lost, are gone, are of no consequence, no effect. We happen to live in an age that is part of the prophetic tradition. If you look at the religious writings of all of the world's great faiths, you'll see that there is the notion of progressive revelation is built in. It's not unique to the Baha'i faith, progressive revelation. Bahá'u'lláh explains it fully. But the concept is there in all of the faiths, in the sense that every one of these messengers foretold his own return. Okay? I go away and come again unto you. In Hinduism, in every age, when evil and injustice abounds, do I take physical form and walk with men, succoring the good, thrusting evil back, and seating virtue on her throne again. In every age. Now, in the writings of the Baha'i faith and of other religions, the word eternity appears. From all eternity to all eternity. Many of us came to believe that eternity was forever, and so therefore you couldn't have more than one eternity. But eternity in the religious construct is the time of a manifestation's rule. Okay? So the eternity is a dispensation. Okay? So the eternity that we see in Christianity is over. That's not a criticism of Christianity. Of Muhammad, it's over. This is a new eternity, and it will last for 500,000 years. Why? Because while we've had this prophetic tradition of the promise of one to come next, there's also a promise of a great day of God. Every time a manifestation comes is the day of God. The New Jerusalem is the revelation sent down from God to man for that age. But the great day of God is a reference to that time down the corridor of history when they would emerge a great teacher. In Buddhism, the fifth Buddha, the supremely enlightened Buddha, Maitreya Buddha. In Hinduism, the 10th avatar, the Immaculate Reincarnation Lord Krishna. In the Old Testament, the Lord of Hosts. Because in the Old Testament, we have two figures, Messiah and Lord of Hosts. And if you look at the characteristics of Messiah and Lord of Hosts, they're different. They're very different. Okay? The Lord of Hosts is the one on whom shoulders shall sit the government, and he shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, King of Kings, and every nation shall go, and every knee shall bend. That's Bahá'u'lláh, the prophet founder of the Bahá'í faith. Okay? What is going on in the world today, as in spite of the fact that it's cruel, it's evil, it's vicious, is a necessary stage in the maturity of the human race. Now we're going to use another example, and that is of ourselves. We all have a rhythm to our lives. We all go through stages. The same as humanity has gone through stages, we ourselves go from being infants to children to adults. We'll talk about youth briefly in the meantime, okay? Now we have, I don't know if Dr. Phil's here, but he knows what I'm saying because he deals with this all the time. The child, the infant, is ignorant. Pure, but ignorant. Now that's normal for a child, for a baby, okay? The child, in some traditions, the age of reason, not maturity, but the age of reason is 7. And that's where you know what's good and what's bad. If you look at a child, okay, at the age of 5, do they do what you ask them to do because they understand the wisdom of what is happening? Or they do what you ask them to do because they fear the consequences? Yeah. Okay. Fear of God is a very old statement and principle. We have both the love of God and the fear of God. But fear belongs to a lower spiritual era, if you want, of development. The ideal soul, the soul that is mature, does that which is right for the sake of right. As Baha'u'lláh says, walk in my statutes for love of my beauty. It isn't that fear of God is not there. It is. Because some people in the world, and we're not talking about their chronological age, but their spiritual age, they can be 70 or 80 years of age, they still respond only to fear. Okay? So, we go and we look at adolescence. Adolescence is called by psychologists the passage of crisis. It's that period in our life when we're going on dependence to independence. We're dependent on our parents emotionally, physically, intellectually, etc., etc. And we have to go through this passage so that we can come out the other side and be accountable for our own behavior. Without that, we cannot reach maturity. That's where humanity is and has been for quite some time. Okay? Now, it is absolutely essential that we come out of adolescence, or we will remain arrested emotionally, spiritually, in every other way. So, in the rise and fall of civilizations, we will see all of these symbols in real time. The Dark Ages, for example. The Dark Ages occurred in Christianity. Okay? In Christianity. And it's before the year 1100. Now, Christianity had given risen to Byzantium, a great civilization. And then it went dark. And in Europe, it was brutal. It was brutal, and the monks took the classics and the writings to Ireland. And so that's how the Irish saved civilization. That and the Crusades, where they encountered a culture far more sophisticated. At that time, Islam led the world in astronomy, physics, mathematics, art, centers of learning, you go on and on. And so they brought back from the Crusades these new ideas. And you can see the writings of kings and important people in the Middle Ages talking about the wealth of Islam, and hence we get the Renaissance. Okay? But that Renaissance, okay, was only the dawn, the beginning of a dawn. Now let's talk about dawn very briefly, because we're speaking of a new age. In physics, the dawn is 10 minutes before sunrise. It's not sunrise. It's just before sunrise. When we don't have the direct light of the sun, but we have some light, the first light. We don't see details. We see outlines. We see shapes. Okay? We can see the idea of peace, the idea of women's equality, the ideas of kindness to animals with some people, St. Francis, people like that. But the general population is largely ignorant of these things. Then we have the sun at its first appearance. In the Baha'i faith, it's the Bab, okay? And in the writings of the Baha'i faith, we look at both the dawn and the rise of the Bab. And in the dawn of this era, we had very holy souls, so tuned they knew something was about to happen. John the Baptist, for Christians, is an example of a soul who was so tuned, so aware, he was preparing people for the coming of Messiah. In this faith, Sheikh Ahmad, Syed Kazim, people like that, were doing the same thing. Now, once the sun rises, okay, it sends out an energy to the whole world. It does not have to find individuals who will listen per se, okay? It's going to influence the world. Now, that's why if you look at the 19th century, late 18th, 19th century, you have this quantum leap of science and technology, okay? You have the development of human rights in the 19th century, okay? The rise of democracy, all in the 19th century. We're coming, remember, from systems that were autocratic, that were despotic, that had individual leaders, and the way they lived was their business, okay? And the individual citizen, his or her life was dependent on the goodwill of the king, emperor, queen, whatever. That's all gone. That's all gone. Now, how did that happen in such a short period of time? Because it is short in the grand scheme of history. We've had kings and tyrants and emperors for thousands of years. All of a sudden, in 1 century, they're gone. As of the end of World War I, the whole Habsburg dynasty collapsed. The Ottoman Empire collapsed. They're all gone, okay? There's only 1 or 2 left, and they are leaders in name only. They don't have real authority. And that's because what Bahá'u'lláh came to bring was the dignity of the individual. It is the empowerment of the individual soul to make a better life and a better society. So change in this age comes and has come from the bottom up, not from the top down. Okay? And that's the reality of current history. So when we're talking about the rise and fall of civilizations, we see whenever there's going to be a change, we see 2 processes. We see the collapse. Okay, if you may have heard of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire by Gibbons, okay? And he talks about what happened. Essentially, it lost its glue, its unity, its moral force. And there were all kinds of systems, different peoples coming into the Roman Empire with vastly different ideas, some of them from the barbarians and some of them from who knows where. Okay. That process is inevitable. The other process, which starts, by the way, long before the collapse is obvious, is the rise of the new. In Hinduism, there's an expression, before you call, I answer. Before you have become aware of the need for a new messenger, I've already sent one. I've already sent one, okay? There was a Congress of World Religions in Chicago, the first one, 1893. It's also the first place where the Baha'i faith was mentioned. There was a bishop who got up and he said, you know, the first time around, he was referring to the appearance of Christ, the first, we missed it. There's a good chance we've missed it again. Now, that is a reference to the 1840s, when we had the days of Adventism, The millennialists, okay, you've probably heard the case of the missing millennium, because the expectation in both Christianity and Islam amongst their scholars was the time is right. Some went to the book of Daniel and they calculated the number of days, okay, it'd be 1200 and so many days, etc., etc. And they got together in different ways and they started to look. So I'll tell the story of the Reverend Miller, who took his flock. He was a minister in the United States. He took his flock to the Appalachians, okay, to await the descent of Christ physically on a cloud. Because Christ said, I shall come in the clouds, okay? Then shall the Son of Man come in the clouds. Well, what are the clouds? Again, symbolism. It's not literal. They took it literal. Didn't happen the way they thought it did, so they disbanded and reformed as the Seventh-day Adventists, by the way, okay? But the cloud is a barrier between us and the sun, the veils. Revelation is always a test. It's always a test. There are veils, traditions, okay, especially religious traditions, all beliefs, the faith of our fathers. I was born Irish Catholic, okay. No one had ever left in my family, and so when I considered the Baha'i faith, one of the things that went through my mind is this will kill my mother. That's normal reaction. Okay, my mother became a Baha'i, to make a long story short. Okay, but that's inevitable. Okay, that's where we get into the water and the fire. The water is the grace of God. The fire is to burn away those veils, so that we can see the sun directly for what it truly is, not for what somebody says it is. Hence, Bahá'u'lláh has brought in the independent investigation of truth. Clergy belongs to a previous age. He paid respect to the clergy, but he abolished it. Because he said in this age, every soul has both the capacity and the responsibility and the ability to seek truth independently. Now, let's shift over now to why do we need a religion to guide a civilization? You'll hear people say, I'm a good person. I can be on my own. I know what's right and wrong. I don't do this and I don't do that, and I give to this group and that group. To be a good person is to be in touch with the will of God in every age. What this society needs and what is good in this age, Terry Spratt could not in a million years concoct or imagine, nor can anyone else. Okay? It is not up to me to say what the world needs. It is up to the messenger of God, sometimes compared and called the divine educator, the divine physician, okay, who has his pulse on the sickness of the times, on the needs of the age. They are the ones who will give us the map, the guideline, to show us what are the areas of concern, what are the needs of the age. That's how we then harness ourselves to the will of God and work in the service of humanity along those lines. And that's why the Baha'i faith has been at the United Nations with NGO status. It has representation at every federal level in most of the world's governments, certainly the democratic ones. It still suffers under persecution, but so do the Christians, okay? And so do all kinds of other faiths, the Jews, etc., because of intolerance, because of bigotry, because of ignorance. You know, when Baha'u'lláh is talking about the cause of error, we call it sin. He says the chief causes are ego and ignorance. Ego is what they call in the East the insistent I, what I call the unholy trinity, me, myself, and I. Okay, I know better. Okay, I don't know anything. Not a clue. Not a clue by myself. But if I listen to the Word of God for this age, then I will be in harness. Then I will be able to work in the garden. There's a story of Abdul Baha, who is the eldest son of Baha'u'lláh, and he compared the Baha'i faith to a garden, but it has a contained area. He said, some will walk by the garden and not see it at all. And some will walk by and admire it. And some will come in and look around for a while and then leave. And some will stay to tend the garden. In every age, the first Christians, the first Muslims, the first Buddhists, there are always those who stayed to tend the garden. So those of you who are here for the first time, we welcome you. Baha'is are like fingers that point to the sun. There comes a time when you stop looking at the finger and you look directly at the sun. Read the Baha'i writings. And if I could say one thing, we all need humility. The one quality that God cannot have is the one quality we must have. When we're investigating the claims of Bahá'u'lláh, we must pray and get rid of those silly notions. Or as Paul said, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. Now I am become a man, I must put away childish things. So we have to put away superstitions, traditions that interfere with the progress not only of the individual soul, but of the whole human race. We're living in the greatest day of history. The civilizations, one and all, are collapsing around us. In Thailand, they're rioting. In Ukraine, we know what's going on there. In the Sudan, in Nigeria. It goes on and on and on. There are, as it was said there will be wars and rumors of wars. Okay? The signs are all there. They've been there for over a century. Good luck. And I think I'll stop there and see if you have some questions. No, please. These are all from the Baha'i writings. We're just fingers that point, hopefully. When I was first, I came across the Baha'i faith at London University. The professor was a Baha'i, never heard of it. Wasn't looking for a new faith. I mean, I was a Catholic. As an altar boy, I could say the whole Mass in Latin. The whole thing, okay? This was my background. I had a great uncle who was the Archbishop of Kingston. Every religious order in the family. It goes on and on and on. And I went to a meeting after the course was over. It was a course on Shakespeare, I think. And the professor was a Baha'i. I never heard the word. I thought it was B'nai B'rith. You know, this Jewish men's organization. It was a slow Sunday, so why not? And I can remember leaning forward when the penny finally dropped, and I said, "Are you saying that Christ has returned?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Oh." But that was the moment when I started to look at the Baha'i faith seriously. Prior to that, it was like a philosophical mind game. I was, being Irish, we love to debate and love to discuss, so we talk about this, that, and the other thing. But when he said that, then I had nothing to say. I kind of fell back and said, I better look at this, because if this is true, the least I can do is investigate the claims of Baha'u'lláh. And after that, we put our trust in God. And as Abba Baha said, be not idle but active, and fear not. Fear not. However the world is going to go, we know that God is in his heaven. Everything's in order. Let's get on with it. I'm a person of very frank opinions, as you probably realize. Are there questions?
Terry, could you explain the Son of God?
Okay. Jesus came in the station of the sun. There's a parable in Christianity, okay, where the Lord of the Manor, remember, he wants to hold a feast. So he sends his messengers out, okay. Not too many people come. Then he finally sends his son. That's Jesus, okay. Then he himself goes out. The Son is Christ. The Lord of the Manor is Baha'u'lláh. We're in that age, okay? Let's be very careful that we don't rank one messenger over the other. because the ultimate reality is that they are all mirrors of God. Okay? You cannot locate God in a physical person. You cannot crucify God. This is silly. Okay? What you can do is look at these perfect souls who, like mirrors, reflect the light and the heat of the Son or God, which is the knowledge and the love of God. Whoso believeth in me, Jesus said, believeth not in me, but in him who sent me. The Father is greater than I. Anyway, you can go on and on and on. It's all there. Okay, and there are a number of biblical scholars, Bahá'ís, who have laid it all out, for people coming from whatever background, including Hinduism, Buddhism, etc. It's all there. Okay, the native peoples have prophecies. One of the things I had to wrestle with as a Catholic is that in those days, heaven was ours. Let's get that straight, okay? The Protestants, maybe a back room. I told the story about my grandmother, who was considered a little eccentric because she said Mrs. Jones across the street, who was a Protestant, was such a good woman, she'd probably get into heaven. And that was considered bizarre. That's the way we were in Toronto in 1950. People have no idea. They talk about Toronto the good. Nonsense. It was bigoted. We didn't have people from other cultures that many. Okay, that came much later. Okay, but it's part of a process. Okay, so I had to look at, well, wait a minute. How about all those people who never heard of Christ? How about the people who, couldn't have heard of them? Because one of the Old Testament, one of the Christian prophecies is that the Lord of hosts would not come until Christianity had reached all corners of the earth, and the last missionaries reached the South Pacific in the 1840s. Just coincidentally, okay? How about all these people? Well, quite frankly, if it was already there. Jesus said, "Other sheep have I, not of this fold. In my Father's house there are many mansions." But what we've tended to do is we've corrupted the teachings, which doesn't mean changing the words. It means twisting them to suit our own fancies, especially on the part of the leaders. Okay, because if you look at who is it that got them to release Barabbas? Pontius did his famous wash the hands because he knew that Jesus hadn't done anything terrible. It was Annas and Caiaphas, the Sanhedrin, the high priests, who got them to release a murderer instead of Christ. And that's been true in every age. Okay? Now, we remember the true minister, the true rabbi, the true mullah. Fine. But the leaders, the ones who should know better, but also the ones who stand to lose power. Let's face it. The snake in the Garden of Eden is ego. Power. The Pharaoh had it coming out of his headdress and on his... You've all seen the medical symbol, healing power. Ego. That's the old snake. It's not a physical snake. And Abdu'l-Baha lays this all out in the end. He says you can take it figuratively or you can take it literally. And he explains it in such simple and realistic terms. And at the end he says, if you want to take it literally, you have a snake talking to people about apples. But we've done that, unfortunately. And we've done it not on our own, with the help of people who kind of misled us. Now, notice what's happening in the world. You talk to a Hindu scholar today, and they will insist that Hinduism is a monotheistic religion. One God. That's fairly new. You talk to, there was a Jewish rabbi who referred to Christ as my brother Jesus the rabbi. It's not complete, but it's a step. One of the popes referred to Muhammad as a prophet. Okay? And so they're coming to terms in very small ways with the fact that some of the things that they believed for so long don't hold water. So they got rid of limbo a few years ago. That was the idea that a baby was going to a special place if they hadn't been baptized. And the baptism, by the way, came from two sources. What Jesus said about baptism and by fire. Fortunately, they forgot the fire in the literal sense. And the other was John the Baptist. But John the Baptist never baptized children. It was a symbol, they were all adults, and it was a symbol of the end of the retreat, the preparation. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have the other question. Because I'm not in a Christian background, so it's a little hard for me to understand when somebody telling me that Jesus has no father, therefore the greatness of Jesus was because he did not have a father.
No.
The son of
Well, but Abdu'l-Baha says if the greatness of Jesus is that he has no father, then Adam is greater because he had neither father nor mother. Now, he did, but what Abdu'l-Baha is saying is that's not the greatness, okay? The greatness of Jesus is in his perfections, okay? We do accept the virgin birth, but that's not, because if you look at Kitab-i-Gan, Baha'u'lláh talks about Mary, okay? That soul who was so perplexed, how could she face people, etc., etc. Now, in a scientific sense, by the way, here's the interesting thing scientifically. The fact that there is a virgin birth is not by itself the most spectacular part of that story. The thing that's most spectacular is that it was a male. How do you get a male virgin birth? Spontaneous pregnancy, and we have a doctor here. I don't know if he wants to comment on this. But the idea of a spontaneous pregnancy is not that far out, but that it be a male. Now remember that the whole Christian position is that Jesus is born of God. And the whole purpose behind that symbolism, because he had a physical birth, is to show that his reality, his spiritual reality, that of perfections, comes from God, not society. There was a famous historian, Toynbee, who set out trying to show that you could explain Jesus as a normal social response to the conditions of the time. And he ended up proving the complete opposite, okay? And saying that there is no way you can understand a Christ, Jesus, as a normal outcrop of a society. By the way, the word Christ is Greek. It means the anointed one. Jesus was born Jesus ben Joseph, son of Joseph. Christ is his title. Okay. Does that answer your question? Okay. In Hinduism, there is a representation of Lord Krishna being born with an elephant tipping his mother at birth. There's no man. Same idea. The elephant being a symbol of spirituality, if you want.
Terry, at Greenwood, I'm at the retirement home in Greenwood. This lovely girl, she's a devout Baptist, and somehow she heard that I was a Baha'i, and she came to me and knelt at my feet, and she said, Ellen, false prophecy, false prophecy. So I asked her to explain. She didn't know one word of what the Bible said. Somebody had just told her it was false prophecy.
Okay. Let's talk about this, because in Tibet they have two expressions, by the way, in terms of how, if you look at every religious tradition, it is split. Okay, the first split in Christianity was the Greek Schism, but the real big one was Reformation. Martin Luther, okay, etc., etc. There are, or were, 30 years ago when I took a course at U of T, 3,000 churches. How do we get from one Bible, one Christ, to 3,000 churches? Okay. The false prophet idea is, if you look at what Jesus said, you judge a good tree by its fruit. A bad tree does not bring forth good fruit, nor a good tree bad fruit. So what are the results, if you want, the fruits of Baha'i teachings? Equality of women, dignity of the individual, independent investigation of truth, the oneness of humanity, the harmony of science and religion, the universal education as a right of every human being. It goes on and on and on and on. Okay? We take these, we're sitting here in Canada 2014, and these make sense to us. When they were announced, they were heresies. You're going to take a power away from clergy? Oh, no, you're not. You're going to make women equal? Excuse me, we're still struggling with that. There was a group of teenagers went into a school in Nigeria not long ago, and they killed all the boys and said to the girls, education is haram, forbidden. Talk about Looney Tunes. You know, when we lose the spirit of faith, we become worse. Worse than the animals. You know, Bahá'u'lláh says, if religion is not the cause of unity, it would be better if there were no religion at all. And the reason for that is the damage it does. The damage that perverted religion has done and continues to do, we see it. Okay? But that's not true religion. That's against every religious teaching ever uttered. Okay? Now the false prophet, okay, the other saying in Tibet, okay, this is the day of the 1,000 lamas. Now, that means in this age, all kinds of people would pop up with their theories, their psychologies, as to how to be this, that, and the other thing. And some of them make millions, by the way, and this is a side comment, and it's very much a personal. The environmentalism has become a business, an industry. So has aliens, okay, ghosts and goblins and things that go bumpity bump. All kinds of things get people's attention, and they are making millions. And so you ask, do I believe in aliens? I couldn't care less. How does that impact on the poverty, the suffering, the inequality, the tyranny, the injustice of the world? The aliens aren't doing it. We're doing it to ourselves. And this is the only choice we have. Ultimately, the cause of God will succeed. You cannot frustrate the will of God. What we can do is hold it back, and in doing so, we bring more garbage on ourselves. Bahá'u'lláh said that. He wrote to the kings and the rulers. The only one to answer courteously was Victoria, and then he said, now that you have refused the most great peace, hold ye fast to the lesser peace. The lesser peace is what we're in now. And it is a painful road of learning what we could have learned a long time ago. You will hear people say, humanity is one. Obama will say it. Okay? All kinds of people will say it. The Foreign Minister of Canada used an expression which I know he got from the Baha'is and the presentations, because he knows all about the Baha'i faith. He said, we believe in Canada in unity in diversity. He did not say multiculturalism. He said unity in diversity, because multiculturalism, the Chancellor of Germany and the Prime Minister of England have both said it's failed. And the reason it's failed is because by definition it's not possible. You can't have a whole bunch of cultures existing in the same space. Culture means principles, beliefs. Oh, really? So you believe in inequality of women? And I believe in equality? We're going to get along? Excuse me. It doesn't work that way. You believe in independent investigation of truth? You believe in controlling people? That's not going to work either. So it's unity in diversity. That's what the garden of humanity is about. Grace. Well named Grace.
Clarify for me, that was a new thought to me, that you referred to the Christ as being a label?
A what?
Did you say that Christ was a...
It's a title.
It's a title, you said.
The anointed, it means the anointed one.
See, to me, what I have seen the Christ as was the Spirit of truth.
It is.
There's a scripture that says the reason that Jesus was different from other Jesuses and other people was because the Spirit of truth dwelt richly in him.
And what is the Spirit of truth? Where does the Spirit of truth come from? God.
Yeah.
God. See, they have many titles. They're referred to as the divine educator, the perfect exemplar, the divine physician. Goes on and on and on, the Spirit of truth. Now, remember that in Jesus, he said, when he who is the Spirit of truth shall come. He's talking about Bahá'u'lláh. I go away and come again unto you. They're all one.
Yeah, but Bahá'u'lláh turned out to be a human being too. To me, the Spirit of truth has always been not confined to a human being, but expressed itself everywhere.
Oh, hang on. Okay, let's back up a little bit. The Spirit of truth, in terms of the infallible source of guidance in every age, is the person of the manifestation. They have two realities. They have a physical reality. Jesus was born, he ate, he slept, etc., and he was crucified. That's Jesus. The Christ is his spiritual reality. Huh?
That was Jesus, the human part of
That's
it.
right.
Yes.
The spiritual side, and it's the same with Bahá'u'lláh. The physical part of Bahá'u'lláh is Hussein Ali. That was his born name. Jesus was Jesus ben Joseph. This is Hussein Ali. The Spirit of truth is in Bahá'u'lláh. And he will describe where he was, in a sense, when he received the message. Remember, Jesus didn't start practicing his message, his mission, until the age of 30. His ministry lasted 3 years, at the end of which he was crucified. Bahá'u'lláh puts it this way: I was asleep upon my couch, which means he's unaware. Sleep here is unaware, when lo, the breezes of the all-merciful wafted over me and taught me the knowledge of all that was and ever will be. Spirit of truth. What we need to realize, and that's why you don't see pictures of Bahá'u'lláh, because we're not concentrating on the physical. It is the spiritual reality of Bahá'u'lláh that is uppermost. Abdu'l-Bahá says, for example, Christ is alive, and I'm going to say it, but not in the churches. He's alive in the hearts of the believers.
Yes.
Okay? But here's the thing we have to realize. And here's what I had to get over, and a lot of people have to get over. God is not in competition with himself.
Right.
All of the messengers come from the same source. They are all one. We call it divine unity. Ultimately, there's one God. The rays of that Son of Truth, of God, shine in different mirrors in different times of history, different requirements, but it's all one Son.
But it's not confined to that individual, is it?
Yes.
I mean, the Spirit.
Now, that's different. Okay. Inspiration is available to everyone. Revelation is unique to the messengers. Revelation is what we get in the form of a book or a set of teachings, a Sermon on the Mount. Okay? That's different from inspiration. We mentioned earlier that when the age emerges, this energy goes out, it's like electricity, and it brings to life all kinds of things. But it also, I'm going to use this analogy. When the sun rises, okay, you'll see some flowers, they turn to the sun, and they open and they close the sun and this, that, and the other thing. The sun falls on everything, okay? But the garden of religion, I'm going to change the term. The garden of spirituality needs to be disciplined. It needs to be tended. It's like a gardener or an orchardist. You have to prune it. You have to water it. You have to make sure things are right. The only thing that doesn't require careful attention are weeds. And we are living in the age of all kinds of weeds. People come up with notions here and there, all over the place, with not a tittle of authority. Not a tittle of authority. I read a book, somebody was reading this book. I can't remember the author, so I'm not going to guess. And in this book, and this guy's, by the way, a multi-million-dollar seller, it says God doesn't want us to have laws. He wants us to work it out for ourselves. And I thought, this is unreal. Unbelievable. Because if that were the case, we'd all be back in the cave. The knowledge that we have. And even people, by the way, who are atheists or claim they're atheists, okay, their ethics come from a religious source, whether they want to admit it or not. It didn't come out of a vacuum, okay?
Would you say that what you're explaining is the same as what to me is personal guidance for your everyday life?
That's inspiration.
That's what you would call inspiration.
That's right.
Okay.
But it's not revelation. It
No.
doesn't tell Grace what God wants her to do in the service of humanity this age.
It doesn't tell Grace how to lead her
No,
life
no, no,
from
no.
day to
It
day.
does, but it's limited. It doesn't tell you what the will of God is for this age.
Yeah, okay, the big picture. But for myself,
You're part of the big picture, sweetheart. You are part of... Do you know that we are all created to carry forward a never-advancing civilization? We are not here for personal salvation. That's gone. We are here, okay, to serve humanity, to serve mankind. There's a statement of the Bab. He says, those who do things for the sake of heaven are not worthy of heaven, even though heaven is much to be desired. What does he mean? He means that the motive of our actions has to be pure. It's for others. Because I am interconnected. We are all interconnected. Society works on the principles of cooperation and reciprocity, which means what goes around comes around. We all have an influence. Chuck.
Well, perhaps another way to look at Grace's point is that we have an individual identity, each of us, and an individual relationship with God. And
Yeah.
we also have a social identity and the need to relate to each other. And it is the revelation that Terry's talking about, which is black on white, that can regulate our activities because it's objective, right? Charles might have an inspiration that everybody should wear tan pants all the time. That's it. No other colors.
Turtlenecks.
Or turtlenecks, right. But that may be my inspiration, and then somebody disagrees with me and we're not united anymore.
Yeah.
So the standard in weighing and determining whether our inspirations are valid or not is the Word of God.
That's how we filter everything. To know whether I'm right or wrong, I have no way in myself of knowing whether what I'm doing is right or wrong unless I refer to an authority. And that is the Word of God in every age. Now, faith is essentially, and this is another quote, the mystical connection between God and the individual soul. So that reinforces what you're saying. But we are, as Chuck was saying, more than individuals. Okay? We left the cave. We went through the stage of tribes, city-states, nations. We're now international. Regard humanity as one human body, Bahá'u'lláh says. To be able to regard humanity as one human body and to know how to treat that body, let's say as a physician, I have to understand. I need knowledge. Where does that knowledge come from? Look at the world. There are people with the most outrageous views. They're killing people. They're controlling them. They're marrying 6-year-old girls. This, that, and another thing. And they, by the way, some of them are absolutely convinced that they're right. They're convinced. You know, sincerity is not the truth of anything. It is not the proof of anything. In the Middle Ages, there were people who believed the world was flat, and it was an absolutely solid belief. They wouldn't travel more than 2 weeks from their village for fear of falling off. Now, how, against that, how do you... When Galileo said that the Earth is not the center of the solar system, he was threatened with heresy. And he offered to show the doctors, have them look through his telescope. They refused because they said it was the devil's instrument, the telescope. Now, they were convinced, they were sincere, out of their minds, but sincere. Correction, out of reality. So, Public opinion is not the standard of truth. If it were, women wouldn't have equality, we'd still have slavery, and the world would be flat. The only standard of truth is a revelation in every age. There's a writing of Bahá'u'lláh that says, if you are possessed of a certain truth, and he's talking about how to offer it kindly and with tact and wisdom. Okay? Notice the term possessed. In other words, it's in our possession, but it's not from us. I can possess this cup, but it's not from me. The only possession we have of certain truth is from revealed truth.
Terry, what about all the prophecies in the Bible? We had a brilliant minister. I grew up in the George Street Mennonite Church in Waterloo, and we had a brilliant minister. And he explained the Bible to us, Sunday school, and then all the other different classes and everything else. And then when we were expecting the second coming, So when I went to University Western, Doug Martin, who's now in the NSA, isn't he? He's still on the NSA?
No, he was on the House of Justice, but he's now retired, yeah.
Where is he?
He's in Toronto, he's retired.
Okay, well, he sat behind me at university in philosophy. He was a brilliant student. And anyway, nothing was said, but when we were at a picnic, the school kids, Doug Martin tiptoed up to me and he whispered in my ear, he said, "Helen, the Lord has come." Oh, I got so excited. I practically flew. and so my Nancy Campbell and Laura Davis, two friends of mine, came from Toronto, and we read the Bible cover to cover. They came every Tuesday, and by golly, it was all there. And he had explained it so perfectly. Of course, I knew that I was a Baha'i when Doug Martin said to me, "The Lord has come." So anyway, that was just so, to me it was a heavenly experience.
Yeah. Here's the thing, I just want to make one comment here. If intellect, were the answer to the world's problems, we'd all be living in silk, because we've never had so much intellectual power. Look at the apostles. Look at the first believers. They were not highly educated. Peter kept track of the days of the week by counting beans, but Jesus said, "This, thou art Petra, rock like Peter, on this I will found my church." You see, it is purity of soul, the purity of heart, that is the first requirement. There are all kinds of brilliant people, and yes, we need that. Abdu'l-Baha says, if you have an unlearned man who is spiritually aware and a learned man who is not, the unlearned is superior. But if you combine the two, you have light upon light. That's why education. But I've met people who don't have beans in terms of a formal education, but boy, do they have it here. You don't have to get into a long song and dance about it, There was a tribe in New Guinea. The Baha'is went from Australia, and they started to talk to them, and the guy interrupted him and said, "Stop." He said, "What is taking you so long?" They had their prophecies. It was riddled with alcoholism, this tribe. The missionaries had given up on it. Baha'is went in. Within a short period of time, it became essentially a Baha'i village, so they had their first feast. And they were forming an assembly. We elect our assembly. We have no nominations, no electioneering. We vote for 9 people with certain qualities, and it's a secret ballot without reference to personalities. They had no written tradition, no script. So how do you elect people with no script? They formed a circle, They gave each voter 9 sticks. That's the number you're going to vote. And then one by one they got up and they walked around the outside of the circle, and they drop a stick here. Nobody could see who they were dropping. They drop a stick there because they're all praying. Mm-hmm. They counted the sticks. They had their assembly. Then they had a fund. in the Baha'i faith, nobody can contribute to the Baha'i fund except the Baha'i. We don't take money. The Ford Foundation offered us $2 million right after I became a Baha'i. We couldn't take it. And for our work in racial unity. So they collected the equivalent of about 60 cents. They consulted for 2 hours. The Baha'is are sitting there from Australia thinking, what's going on? Until they realized they'd never had the opportunity to consult about anything in this way. Okay? Because even in the tribal system, you have a hierarchy. Anyway, you've been very patient. I hope that this is off now. Good. We've gone too long. That's a sign.
Thank you so much, Terry.
My pleasure always.